You
My
just don't
son and his
understand how
wife
hard
lived
this
in my
is.
house for 8 years.
I am
When
so
the baby was
sorry.
born, I offered to help, but to my surprise, my daughter-in-law pushed me hard and shouted, "Don't touch the baby, you're dirty." In that moment, my blood ran cold. I called my son, and the 3 words my husband said next left them both completely stunned. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. My name is Juana. I'm 73 years old. Everything changed when our son Mateo showed up at our door with his new wife Sofia. They had recently married and were going through financial difficulties. Ricardo and I looked at each other that day without needing to speak. Of course they'll stay with us. That's what families do. They support each other during hard times. It'll only be for a few months until we get back on our feet, Mateo promised as they brought in their suitcases. At first, everything seemed normal. I was happy to have company again, to have my son back home. Sofia seemed kind and helpful. She always offered to help in the kitchen, asked about my family recipes, showed interest in how I kept the house. I felt useful again, like I was passing down a legacy to the next generation. But what was supposed to be just a few months turned into a year, then 2, and eventually 8 long years. The dynamics in the house changed so gradually that I barely noticed what was happening. First, there were small suggestions about how to better organize the kitchen cabinets. Then came comments about how I should prepare certain dishes. Over time, the suggestions turned into criticisms, and the criticisms into veiled orders. "I think it's best if you don't touch that, Juana. Let me handle it," or "Juana, that's not the right way to do it. Do it properly." Little by little, I started to feel like a stranger in my own kitchen. I realized I avoided cooking when Sofia was around, waiting until she left to make something simple for Ricardo and me. I began moving around the house carefully, trying to make as little noise as possible, as if I were intruding in a place that no longer belonged to me. Ricardo, of course, noticed the change. "What's wrong, Juana?" he would ask sometimes when we were alone in our room. "You seem like a shadow in your own home." I would shrug, not wanting to cause trouble. "I'm just adjusting. Sofia has her quirks, and she's just trying to help." Then, after months, Sofia had a baby. A beautiful, perfect boy. My first grandchild. My heart overflowed with love the first time I saw him at the hospital. When they brought the baby home, I prepared everything to welcome them. Fresh flowers in the living room, the house impeccably clean, a small gift for the newborn. 3 days after the baby arrived, I was in the kitchen preparing a small flower arrangement to brighten up the room where Sofia spent most of her time with the baby. I was humming softly, happy to have a purpose to contribute in some way. I heard the baby crying from the living room and decided to see if I could help. I walked quietly toward the living room carrying the flowers. Sofia was sitting on the couch, looking tired, the baby in her arms. She saw me, and her expression instantly changed. "What are you doing? Why are you making so much noise?" "The baby needs to rest." "I'm sorry," I whispered, stepping back. "I just wanted to bring some flowers to brighten up the room." She stood up, holding the baby protectively. I stepped forward, just wanting to get a better look at my grandson. That's when it happened. I felt her arm shove me back forcefully, making me lose my balance. I fell, and the flowers scattered across the floor. The water from the vase formed a dark puddle around me. "Don't you dare touch him!" she shouted, her face twisted in disgust. "You're dirty! Look at the mess you made!" Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Me sitting on the floor of my own living room, surrounded by scattered flowers and water. My body ached from the fall, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation and shock I felt. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had cared for my son his entire life. The hands that had prepared thousands of meals for my family, planted flowers in our garden, held Mateo when he was just a baby. Dirty, she had said. I was dirty. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the baby had stopped crying as if stunned by what had just happened. I felt tears forming in my eyes, not from the pain of the fall, but from the cruelty of her words. In my entire life, no one had ever treated me with such contempt. I tried to collect myself, my trembling hands gathering the scattered flowers. I couldn't look up. I didn't want to see Sophia's face, the disgust in her eyes. I felt Ricardo's presence before I even saw him. He had entered the room drawn by the noise. Juana. His voice was gentle but firm. He knelt down to help me up, his hands gentle on my arms. Let me help you. It was only when I looked into his eyes that I realized something had changed. There was anger there, contained but unmistakable. It wasn't anger directed at me, but something deeper, more resolute. Ricardo looked at Sophia, who stood holding our grandson, a barely disguised look of satisfaction on her face. Mateo Ricardo called, his voice cutting through the silence. Our son appeared at the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Dad, Sophia is just being protective of the baby, he began weakly. First-time mothers can be like that. Mateo Ricardo interrupted, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. I need to speak with you. Now. Sophia shifted the baby to the other arm, lifting her chin in defiance. Actually, Ricardo, Mateo, and I were discussing that we think it would be best if Juana stayed in her room when the baby is in the main areas of the house for hygiene reasons. Do you understand? My heart shattered in that moment. Banished from the common areas of my own home, treated like a threat to my own grandson? I looked at Mateo, hoping he would say something, anything to defend me. But he only avoided my eyes, mumbling something about doing what's best for the baby. Ricardo helped me upstairs to our room. My clothes were wet from the vase water. My knees ached from the fall. But the physical pain was secondary to the sense of betrayal I felt. Are you hurt? Ricardo asked as I changed clothes. I shook my head no. How could I explain that the wound wasn't physical? How do you describe what it feels like to be driven out of your own home piece by piece, day after day, year after year, until you become a stranger within your own walls? That night, lying in bed beside Ricardo, I felt his unease. He wasn't sleeping. His breathing didn't have the familiar rhythm of rest. His mind was working, processing, deciding. The next morning, I moved quietly around our room, a habit I had developed over the years to avoid disturbing anyone. Ricardo watched my careful movements with a thoughtful expression. Juana, he finally said, when was the last time you felt comfortable in our home? The question caught me off guard, when indeed I tried to remember the last time I'd walked downstairs without fear of doing something wrong, the last time I'd cooked without being criticized, the last time I'd spoken freely without being interrupted or corrected. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe before they moved in, Ricardo nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. That's going to change, he said simply. In the hours that followed, I heard Ricardo confronting Mateo in his old study, which had now been turned into the baby's room. The voices were low but intense. I couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. Ricardo was finally questioning the arrangement he had tolerated for so long. Later that day, I was organizing some papers in our room, trying to keep myself busy when I found something strange. Utility bills I didn't recognize, all under Sofia Montero's name, but with our address. Confused, I kept looking and found more documents. Transfers of all our basic services, electricity, water, gas, internet, all in her name. My heart began to beat faster. Something was very wrong. I continued searching now with purpose and found an official form from the Postal Service, a mail forwarding request dated 6 months ago. All the mail addressed to our house was being redirected to Sophia first. When Ricardo came back to the room, I showed him what I had found. His face turned pale as he examined the documents. "Juana, when was the last time you saw any of our utility bills?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "I don't know. You usually handle that, Ricardo. But now that you mention it, I haven't seen a bill in months." "Neither have I," he said gravely. We looked at each other. The realization of what was happening slowly took shape. Sophia wasn't just taking control of our household day by day. She was systematically laying the groundwork for a legal claim on our property. "Ricardo?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "She's trying to take our house." Before he could respond, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Sophia appeared in the doorway, the baby in her arms, a sweet smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Is everything all right? You two seem upset." Ricardo raised the documents. "Sophia, why are our utility bills in your name?" For a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Calculation, a quick assessment of the situation. Then the smile returned wider. "Oh, those," she said with a light laugh. "There was some confusion with the billing company a few months ago. They kept sending the bills to the wrong address, so I transferred them to my name temporarily to make sure they were paid on time. I meant to tell you," she added. "For 6 months," Ricardo asked. "Has it really been that long? Time flies with a baby and all that?" "I'll call tomorrow and transfer them back if you want." The explanation was plausible, but something in her tone felt off. Calculated. Ricardo pressed further. "And what about the mail forwarding? The Postal Service has a request on file to send all our mail to you first." This time, the pause was longer. "Mail forwarding. Honestly, I don't know what you're talking about, Ricardo. Maybe there was a mistake when I updated my address after we moved in." 8 years ago, Ricardo replied. Sophia's mask of sweetness began to crack. "I said I'd look into it, didn't I? I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. We're family. We all live here together." "It's our house, Sophia." Ricardo's voice was firm. She looked at him with what I can only describe as pity. "Of course it is. I never said it wasn't. But we live here too, Ricardo. We contribute to the household. It makes sense to keep things organized efficiently." That's when I found my voice. Small but steady. "And how exactly do you contribute to this house, Sophia?" Her eyes narrowed slightly as she turned to face me. It was the first time in years I had challenged her directly. And I could see the momentary shock in her expression before she regained her composure. "I take care of the baby. I manage the household schedule. I make sure everything runs smoothly," she replied, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Putting the bills in your name without telling us. Handling practical matters that you and Ricardo clearly no longer have time for." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. She wasn't even trying to hide how she truly felt about us anymore. "We're not senile," Sophia, Ricardo said. "We've managed our home and finances for over 40 years. "Of course you have," she said, but her tone said otherwise. "I'm just trying to help. But if you prefer to handle everything yourselves, that's fine. Mateo and I can find another place to live." There was something calculated in her threat, as if she knew exactly which buttons to press. She was betting that our fear of losing access to our grandson would make us back down, that we would tolerate anything from her just to keep the peace. To my surprise, Ricardo didn't hesitate. "Actually, I think that might be for the best." Sophia's face went pale. "Excuse me, I think it's time for you and Mateo to find a place of your own. You've been here for 8 years. That's long enough." "You can't be serious." Her voice rose an octave. Mateo, come here." Our son appeared within seconds, looking alarmed. "What's going on? Your father is trying to throw us out," Sophia said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "He's upset over some silly paperwork, and now he wants to kick us out with a newborn baby." Ricardo handed the documents to Mateo. "Your wife has been putting our household accounts in her name without our knowledge or permission. She also redirected our mail through the postal service." Mateo furrowed his brow as he looked over the papers. "Sophia, what is this?" "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just some administrative convenience to make sure the bills were paid on time. Your dad is making it sound way more sinister than it is." "For 6 months?" Mateo asked. "I told you I meant to mention it. With the pregnancy and everything, it just slipped my mind." Mateo looked at the documents more closely. "This makes it look like you're the primary resident here." "That's ridiculous," Sophia shot back. "It's just paperwork. Your parents are being paranoid." But Mateo was no longer looking at his wife. He was looking at Ricardo, and I could see the moment everything clicked in his mind. All the little changes over the years, all the ways Sophia had gradually taken more control over the house, all the times she made decisions without asking us. Sophia, Mateo said slowly, "Why would you put the utility bills in your name without asking? I already explained." "No," he interrupted, his voice growing stronger. "Why would you really do it?" For the first time since I'd known her, Sophia seemed genuinely rattled. The baby started crying in her arms, sensing the tension in the room. "I was trying to help," she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "Taking care of your parents' house, that's not caretaking, it's control. Someone had to make sure things were handled properly." Properly, I found the strength to speak again, my voice firmer this time. "We've been handling our affairs properly since before you were born." Sophia's mask finally fell away completely. Her careful composure cracked, and for the first time, I saw the true anger underneath. "Yes, in control," she snapped. "Someone needed to be in control here because nothing was being done right. Do you know how frustrating it is to watch things be run inefficiently when you know you could do it better?" "So you decided to take control," I said. "I decided to step up and take care of the things that needed attention without asking for permission." Sophia's voice was filled with restrained fury. "I live here. I contribute to this house. I shouldn't need permission to organize our home efficiently." "This isn't your home," Ricardo said firmly. "It's been my home for 8 years, she almost shouted. "I've cleaned every room, organized every closet, managed every system. I know this place better than any of you at this point." The arrogance in her voice was staggering. She genuinely believed that living in our house for 8 years gave her more right to it than our 40 years of ownership. Sophia, Mateo said, his voice calm but intense. "What exactly were you planning to do with all these accounts in your name?" She looked at him as if he had asked a stupid question. "I was planning to keep the house running smoothly. Someone has to be responsible for these things. But why did it have to be you? Because I'm the one who's here all day. I'm the one who notices when something needs attention. I'm the one who has time to handle the administrative details. You could have asked us to handle our own bills," I pointed out. "I could have. But why would I, if I was already taking care of them?" "Because it's our house," Ricardo repeated. Sophia's patience finally wore thin. "Your house that you can't afford to maintain without our help. Your house that was falling apart before I started organizing it. Your house that Mateo and I have subsidized with our presence and work for 8 years. Subsidized? Mateo's voice was incredulous. "Yes, subsidized. Do you think we've been living here for free? Do you think I wasn't contributing? I've been managing this house, keeping its systems working, improving this property. That has value, Mateo. That means something. Not ownership, I said firmly. Doesn't it? At what point does labor turn into equity? At what point does the person actually running the house get a say in how it's managed? A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about bills and forwarded mail. It was about a fundamental belief that her 8 years of living in our home gave her property rights. Sofia, Ricardo said carefully. Do you think you own this house? She looked at him like he was being deliberately obtuse. I think I've earned a stake in this house. Yes, you've earned a stake in our house. The disbelief in Ricardo's voice was palpable. I've earned a stake in the house I've lived in for 8 years, where I've raised my family, where I've contributed my time, my energy, and my effort to make it a better place. Mateo looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Sofia, this is insane. You can't just claim ownership of someone else's house because you've lived there. Can't I? What about common law marriage rights, tenant rights, and the fact that I've been the one managing this property for years? You're not married to the house, I said, my voice trembling now. And you're not a tenant. You're a guest who overstayed her welcome. I'm a family member who's been contributing to this home while the two of you have grown comfortable clinging to property rights you established decades ago. The arrogance of her statement left all of us momentarily speechless. Sofia seemed to take our silence as agreement. Look, she said, her voice turning reasonable again. I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I just think we need to recognize the reality of the situation. This house works because I make it work. These systems function because I maintain them. This family runs smoothly because I organize it. This family, Mateo said slowly. Or your family. Our family. All of us, including Mom and Dad. Sofia looked at Ricardo and me, and I saw something cold flash in her eyes. Of course, including Ricardo and Juana, they're an important part of this house. An important part, Ricardo repeated, in our own home. In our family home, yes. It's not a family home, Mateo said, his voice growing stronger. It's Mom and Dad's house, and they've been generous enough to let us live in it. For 8 years, Mateo, at some point, generosity turns into partnership. Not without discussion, not without agreement, not without consent. Sofia's face was red now, her control completely gone. Consent. I've been getting consent for 8 years in the form of you all letting me manage these responsibilities. You've been perfectly happy to let me handle everything as long as you didn't have to think about it. She turned directly to Ricardo and me. And you two have been perfectly happy to let me take care of all the hard parts of running this house while you play the roles of generous grandparents. We run our own house, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the trembling I felt inside. Really? When was the last time you balanced a checkbook? When was the last time you called a utility company? When was the last time you researched an internet plan or negotiated a better rate for something? Her words hit me like tiny arrows because there was truth in them. In recent years, Sofia had gradually taken over many of those tasks, always presenting them as helpful efficiency rather than a power grab. And we, in our complacency, had allowed it. That doesn't give you ownership, Ricardo said. It gives me a voice in decisions that affect my family's housing situation. Your family can have its own housing situation, Mateo said quietly. Sofia turned to look at him, her eyes blazing. With what money? Your non-existent job? My non-existent career? Because I've been managing this house for 8 years? That was your choice. That was our agreement. You said we'd stay here temporarily while we got back on our feet. You said your parents wanted to help. You said this was best for our family. I said temporarily, not permanently. And I never said you should take control of their home. I didn't take control of anything. I stepped up when it was needed. The baby was crying louder now, disturbed by the shouting. Sophia tried to soothe him as she kept arguing, but her multitasking was starting to collapse under the pressure. Maybe I said quietly, finding a courage I didn't know I had, the baby should be in a calmer place. Sophia held our grandson tighter. He's fine where he is. He's upset because everyone is yelling. He's upset because his family is being torn apart by selfish people who can't appreciate what they have. The insult was so casual, so direct, it took a moment to register. I felt my face go pale. Selfish people, Ricardo repeated. Yes, selfish. You have more space than you need, more resources than you use, and a family that has been helping you maintain all of it. And the moment someone asks for basic consideration, you want to throw us out. In that moment, I could see clearly there was no reasoning with her. In her twisted mind, we were the villains for wanting control over our own home. She genuinely believed she was the victim in a situation where she had been systematically taking over our lives. The days that followed were tense. Sophia withdrew to the master bedroom with the baby rarely coming out, except to prepare meals for herself and the baby. Mateo seemed lost, torn between loyalty to his wife and the growing recognition of what she had done to his parents. Ricardo was quiet but resolute, spending hours on the phone and going to meetings he didn't explain. One afternoon, while tidying our room, I found Ricardo rummaging through our personal files. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Our insurance policies," he replied. "I want to make sure everything is still in our name." I began helping him search, and that's when we found something that made my blood run cold. Mixed in with our personal documents was a blank deed transfer form, but with the description of our property already filled in. At the bottom in handwriting, I immediately recognized as Sophia's were notes about property values and tax assessments. "Ricardo?" I whispered, my hands trembling. "She's researching how to transfer ownership of our home." Ricardo examined the document carefully. "Where did you find this in our file?" "She must have put it there while rummaging through our papers to get information for the utility transfers." Ricardo studied the form more closely. "Juana, do you remember if anyone has been in our house recently? Any strangers Sophia might have let in?" I thought for a moment. "There was someone here last week while you were at your doctor's appointment. Sophia said it was someone from the county assessor's office checking property values for tax purposes." I thought it was routine. "Did you see any credentials?" "Number Sophia handled it. She said she didn't want to bother me with official matters." Ricardo picked up the phone, and after a few calls, we discovered that the county assessor's office had not sent anyone to our home. Sophia had allowed a stranger into our house under false pretenses, and now we had deed transfer forms in our files. "Ricardo," I whispered, "what is she planning?" Before he could answer, we heard the front door open and Mateo's voice calling for us. We went downstairs and found him in the living room, holding his son, a serious expression on his face. Ricardo showed him the deed transfer form. Mateo examined the document, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Last week," he said slowly, "Sophia was asking me questions about inheritance laws. She said she was just curious about how property transfers work when parents get older." "What kind of questions?" Ricardo asked. "Things like if someone lives in a house long enough, can they claim ownership? If someone significantly improves a property, do they gain rights to it? If elderly people can't manage their affairs, can family members legally take over?" A chill ran down my spine. Every question felt calculated, part of a bigger plan. "And what did you tell her?" I asked. I told her I didn't know much about it, but that she seemed to be overthinking things. Mateo looked at Ricardo, worry in his eyes. "Dad, she's not really trying to take your house, right?" Ricardo handed him a folder I didn't recognize. "Mateo, your wife has spent months transferring our utilities into her name, forwarding our mail, and now she's researching property transfers. Someone pretending to be a county official was in our house last week, gathering information." "What do you think she's trying to do?" Mateo read through the documents, his face paling with every page. "Oh my God," he finally whispered. "She's really trying to take your house." "That's what it looks like. But that's insane. That's theft. That's fraud. That's what happens when someone feels entitled to something that doesn't belong to them." Ricardo looked directly at our son. "Mateo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you part of this? Did you know what she was planning?" The pain on Mateo's face was unmistakable. No, I had no idea, and I'm horrified you even have to ask. I understand why you did, but Dad, I would never do anything to hurt you or Mom. Never." That night, I heard Mateo confronting Sophia through the walls. Their voices rose and fell with bursts of yelling followed by hushed, intense conversations. Sitting on our bed, my hands trembled as I tried to knit a task that once calmed me, but now did little to soothe my anxiety. Ricardo entered the room after a while, his expression grave. "I spoke to a lawyer today," he said. "Roberto Patron. He's going to help us sort this out." "What did he say?" I asked, setting my knitting aside. "He said what Sophia's doing looks like an attempt to establish adverse possession, or at least tenant rights. Transferring the utilities, forwarding the mail, these are classic steps someone might take to establish legal residence. She can do that. She can claim our house." Roberto said it's unlikely she could succeed in a full adverse possession claim since she moved in with our permission. But she could potentially claim tenant rights, which would make removing her a lot more complicated. I felt a knot in my stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means that if she's established herself as a tenant, even without a formal lease, we may have to go through formal eviction proceedings to remove her." "But this is our home, Ricardo. We let them live here for free for 8 years because Mateo is our son. I know, Juana, but the law doesn't always distinguish between generosity and a formal rental agreement. If someone has lived somewhere long-term and taken on household responsibilities, sometimes they can claim tenant rights." I felt dizzy. "So, we're trapped?" "Not necessarily. Roberto will help us. He's preparing formal legal notices demanding that Sophia transfer all the utilities and mail back to our names, and if she refuses, we'll proceed with formal eviction." The words eviction proceedings sounded strange to my ears. I never imagined we'd one day consider evicting our own son and daughter-in-law from our house. But as Ricardo had pointed out, this wasn't just about them living with us. It was about Sophia systematically trying to take legal control of our property. Mateo knocked on our door a few minutes later. His face looked tired but resolute. "She admitted it," he said bluntly. "Everything. The utilities, the mail, the property research. She's been planning this for over a year." "What did she say when you confronted her?" Ricardo asked. "She said she was protecting our family's future. Said you two are getting older, and someone needed to make sure the house stayed in the family when you were gone." Said she was protecting the family. "Protecting the family by stealing from us?" I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. "She said she was making sure the house would go to people who actually care for it, instead of being sold to strangers." The twisted logic left me speechless. How could anyone justify theft as an act of family protection? "And what did you tell her?" Ricardo asked. "I told her what she's doing is theft and fraud. I told her if she didn't fix it immediately, I would support you both in having her arrested." "How did she react to that?" Mateo's face hardened. "She said that if I sided with you against her, she'd make sure I never saw my son again? That threat changed everything. This wasn't just about property fraud anymore. This was about a woman willing to use her own child as a weapon to get what she wanted." "Mateo," I said softly, placing my hand over his, "what do you want to do?" He looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy I had raised, the one who always tried to do the right thing, even when it was hard. "I want to do whatever it takes to stop her," he said. "Even if it means losing my marriage. I won't let her steal from you. And I won't let her use my son as blackmail." The next morning, Ricardo called Roberto Patron and told him we were ready to proceed with formal legal action. The time for family discussions and attempts at compromise was over. Sophia had made her choice. The formal legal notice was delivered to Sophia on a Tuesday morning. Ricardo and I watched from the living room windows. The sheriff approached our front door with official documents in hand. I held Ricardo's hand, both of us knowing this moment would change everything. Sophia opened the door with the baby in her arms. When she realized what was happening, her face cycled through a series of emotions I will never forget. Confusion, then recognition, then pure rage. She slammed the door so hard the baby began to cry. The legal notice demanded that Sophia transfer all utility services back to our names within 7 days, immediately cancel mail forwarding, and cease all activities related to establishing residence or making any property claims on our home. It also informed her she had 30 days to vacate the premises voluntarily or face formal eviction proceedings. More importantly, a formal complaint was being filed with the district attorney's office for identity theft, mail fraud, and attempted property fraud. Within an hour of being served, Sophia stormed into our living room, her face red with fury. I had wisely chosen to visit my sister that day, not wanting to be present for what was sure to be an ugly confrontation. But Ricardo told me everything when I returned. "You can't do this to me," she had shouted, waving the legal papers in the air. "I have rights. I've lived here for 8 years." "You have the right to leave voluntarily," Ricardo said calmly. "That's all. Mateo, tell your father he's making a mistake. Tell him what this will do to our family." Mateo, to his credit, stood firm. "Sophia, what you did is illegal. Dad is being more than fair by giving you a chance to fix this voluntarily." "Fix what? I didn't do anything wrong. You committed identity theft by putting their accounts in your name. You committed mail fraud by forwarding their mail. You attempted property fraud by researching how to transfer their house to your name. Those are crimes, Sophia. I was trying to help this family, taking responsibility when no one else would." Ricardo stepped in. "Sophia, you have 7 days to transfer everything back to our names. You have 30 days to find another place to live. Those are your options. And if I refuse, then you'll be evicted and the criminal charges will proceed." She looked at Ricardo with barely concealed hatred. "Would you really do that? Would you really destroy your son's marriage and take away your grandson over paperwork? Would I really protect my home and my wife from someone who has been systematically trying to steal from us? Yes." She turned to Mateo desperately. "You can't let them do this to us?" Mateo looked at his wife with deep sadness. "Sophia, they're not doing this to us. You did this to us." "I did it for us." "No, you did it for you, and now our son will grow up knowing his mother tried to steal from his grandparents." That seemed to break something in Sophia. She collapsed onto our sofa, still holding the baby. "I just wanted security," she said quietly. "I wanted to make sure our family had a stable home." "You already had one," Mateo replied. "My parents gave it to us freely." "For how long? What happens when they die? What if this house gets sold and we have nowhere to go?" "Then we deal with it like adults, Sophia. We don't steal from the people who've been helping us." She looked between Mateo and Ricardo said he could see her calculating one last desperate move. "Fine," she said, standing abruptly. "Fine. You want me gone, I'll go. But I'm taking my son with me, and you'll never see him again." Mateo's face went pale. "Sophia, don't do this. What, protect my son from people who would destroy his family over money? It's not about money. It's always about money," she screamed. "It's about a house and bills and property value. You're choosing money over your own grandson." That's when Ricardo told me Mateo finally found his full strength. "Actually, Sophia, you're not taking him?" Mateo said, his voice calm but firm, "because I'm filing for divorce and seeking full custody." The silence that followed Ricardo said was deafening. Sophia looked at Mateo like he had just spoken to her in a language she didn't understand. "You can't," she whispered. "I can, and I will." A mother who commits fraud against her child's grandparents isn't someone who should have unsupervised custody of that child. "Mateo, you can't do this to me. You can't take my baby away from me." "I'm not taking him away. I'm protecting him from a mother who thinks theft and fraud are acceptable ways to secure her family's future." Sophia's face crumpled. "Please," she begged. "Please don't do this. I'll fix everything. I'll transfer the accounts back. I'll cancel the mail forwarding. I'll move out. Just don't take my baby." "You should have thought about that before you decided to commit crimes," Mateo said firmly. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. True to her word, Sophia transferred all utilities back to our names. The mail forwarding was canceled. She moved out of our house into an apartment across town, taking only her personal belongings. But the criminal charges went forward. Roberto Patron had advised us that allowing the legal process to continue was the only way to ensure Sophia couldn't try something like this again, with us or with anyone else. The divorce proceedings were swift. When the judge heard about Sophia's attempted property fraud, along with her threat to use the child as a weapon against his grandparents, custody was awarded to Mateo, with supervised visits for Sophia. Throughout this tumultuous period, I rediscovered my voice. Years of being diminished in my own home had left me quiet with little confidence to speak up. But as the legal proceedings moved forward, I was called to testify to explain how I had been gradually pushed out of my own space, how my authority had been undermined, how my dignity had been attacked. The first time I entered the courtroom, I felt my legs tremble. The thought of public speaking terrified me. But when I began to describe the years of small humiliations, the gradual loss of autonomy of being treated like a stranger in my own home, the words began to flow. "She reorganized my kitchen without permission," I told the judge. "She criticized my cooking, my cleaning, my way of being. She pushed me out of spaces in my own home one by one until I moved like a shadow, trying not to disturb, trying not to be noticed." The judge looked at me with empathy. "And when the baby was born, when my grandson was born, I was forbidden to touch him. She called me dirty. She pushed me to the floor when I tried to go near him." My voice didn't falter. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in years, I felt strong, secure in my truth, unbreakable in my resolve to reclaim not just my home, but my dignity. Sophia was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service for the fraud charges. She was ordered to pay restitution for all legal fees and the costs associated with fixing what she had done. She saw her son every other weekend under court supervision and was barred from bringing him to our home during those visits. Mateo moved back into our home temporarily while saving up for a place of his own. But this time, it was different. He paid rent, helped with household expenses, and most importantly, he treated us as the homeowners we were, not as aging relatives who needed to be managed or overruled. 6 months after the initial confrontation, I was in our garden tending to my roses as I watched Mateo push his son on the swing Ricardo had installed. The sound of the baby's laughter was like music filling the spaces that had long been stifled by tense silence and fear. The house felt like ours again. I could sing in the kitchen while cooking breakfast. I could rearrange the cabinets as I liked. I could speak at the dinner table without being interrupted or corrected. Small freedoms that should never have been taken from me, but that I now cherished with renewed appreciation. Ricardo joined me in the garden, wrapping his arm around my shoulders as we watched our son and grandson. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm better than fine," I replied. "I'm home." One afternoon, a few months later, Mateo joined Ricardo and me on the porch as his son played in the yard. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over our little haven of peace. "Mom, Dad," Mateo said, his voice serious, "I owe you an apology for what I asked, for letting it go on for so long, for not seeing what she was doing, for not protecting you when I should have." I looked at my son, this man who had found his courage when it mattered most. "Mateo, you protected us when it counted," I said. "When the choice was clear, you chose what was right. It shouldn't have taken that long. Maybe not, but you got there." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the little one run across the yard, his face lit up with joy and carefree curiosity. He saw me watching and came running, holding a tiny flower he'd found. "Grandma, look," he exclaimed, holding the flower out to me. For you, I took the flower with gratitude, feeling tears prick my eyes. For so long, I had been kept at a distance from this little treasure. Now he came to me freely, offering gifts, seeking my affection. "Thank you, my love," I said, kissing the top of his head. "Did you really think she could take our house?" I asked Ricardo later that night as we lay in bed. "She really believed she deserved it," he replied. "That's the scariest part. She genuinely thought that living here for 8 years gave her more right to the house than our 40 years of ownership." I reflected on that. People can convince themselves of anything if it serves their purpose. The funny thing is, if she had just been grateful, if she had just been respectful, we probably would have helped them forever. He was right. If Sophia had treated our house and us with respect and gratitude, if she had contributed to our home instead of trying to control it, if she had asked for help instead of trying to take what she wanted, we would have been happy to support our son's family indefinitely. But she couldn't do that, I said. She needed to be in control. She needed to own things instead of just enjoying them. And now, she lost it all. I looked out the window where the moon softly lit our garden, the roses I had planted, the swing where my grandson played, the house we almost lost. Not everything I said. She can still see her son. She can still be his mother, even if it's not in the way she planned. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did wrong?" Ricardo asked. I considered the question. I think she'll understand that she lost. I don't know if she'll understand why. 3 years have passed since those turbulent days. Mateo bought a house 4 blocks from ours, close enough to walk over for dinner, close enough that our grandson can ride his bike to our house after school, close enough that I can care for him whenever Mateo needs me. Sophia remarried last year to a man who owns his own home. She still sees our grandson every other weekend, and according to Mateo, she seems happier now that she has her own domain to control. Maybe she learned something from the experience, or maybe she just found a new target for her ambitions. Ricardo and I recently updated our wills, leaving everything to Mateo and setting up a trust fund for our grandson's education. The house Sophia tried so hard to take will stay in our family after all, but it will pass down through love and generosity, not theft and fraud. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about what would have happened if Ricardo hadn't found those papers in the basement, if he hadn't overheard that phone call, if we had just kept ignoring the little signs that something was wrong. Sophia might have succeeded. She could have gradually taken control of our house so completely that by the time we realized what was happening, it would have been too late to stop her. We could have been that elderly couple on the news, the ones who lost everything at the hands of opportunistic family members who ended their days confused and homeless, stripped not just of material possessions, but of their dignity. But Ricardo found those papers. He overheard that call, and when the time came to choose between keeping the peace and protecting our family, he chose protection. This ends now. Those 3 words he said to Mateo that day in the kitchen when he called him and showed him the papers were simple but powerful. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Now I'm happy again. I sing while I cook. I tend my garden with joy. I play with my grandson without fear of being criticized or corrected. Our house feels like our home again, and our grandson is learning something important, that love doesn't come with conditions, that generosity doesn't demand gratitude. But that respect is non-negotiable, even within families, especially within families. This morning, as I made breakfast for Mateo and my grandson, who had spent the night at our house, I felt a deep peace. The toast was golden, the coffee filled the air with its aroma, and I had arranged fresh flowers from the garden in a vase at the center of the table. The sun streamed through the kitchen windows, lighting a space that was once again mine. Mateo came in still groggy, followed by the little one who ran straight to hug me. "Good morning, Grandma," he exclaimed, his arms wrapped around my waist. "Good morning, my love," I replied, kissing the top of his head. Ricardo joined us, his smile warm, as he watched the scene. We sat down together for breakfast, talking and laughing freely. No tension, no fear, no constant sense of walking on eggshells. As Mateo and the little one were about to leave, my grandson paused at the door and turned to me. "Grandma, can I come back after school? I want you to teach me how to make those cookies I like." "Of course you can, my love," I said. "This is your home too." And it was true. This was his home too, not because he had a right to it, not because he had taken it, but because we shared it freely with love and mutual respect. That made all the difference. After they left, I returned to the kitchen to clean up. As I washed the dishes, I reflected on how life can change in an instant, how one moment of courage, one decision to stand up for yourself, can completely alter the course of a family. For so long, I had felt powerless, unable to defend my own space, my own dignity. I had allowed my voice to be silenced, my territory invaded piece by piece, day by day. The fear of causing conflict, of seeming like the villain, had kept me quiet. But I learned something important through this painful journey. Silence is not peace, it's only the absence of resistance. True peace comes from balance, from mutual respect, from clear and healthy boundaries. Ricardo came into the kitchen and hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as I finished drying the last plate. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About everything that happened, about how we almost lost our home." "But we didn't," he said gently. "No, we didn't, thanks to you." "Thanks to us," he corrected. "You were just as brave as I was, Juana. Your testimony in court made all the difference." I smiled at the memory. After years of being diminished, finding my voice had been liberating. Speaking my truth, being heard and validated, had healed something deep inside me. "Did you know that last month was the first time Sophia looked me in the eye during the handoff of our grandson?" I said. She usually avoids eye contact, but this time she looked at me and nodded. She didn't say anything, but it was something. "Maybe she's starting to understand," Ricardo suggested. "Maybe, or maybe she's just accepted defeat. Either way, our grandson is happy Mateo is doing well, and we have our home." He was right, of course. In the end, that's what truly mattered. Last week, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was an unsigned card with just the words, "I'm sorry," written in handwriting I immediately recognized. Along with the card was a small key, the copy Sophia had made of our house without our permission. I didn't show the card to Ricardo or Mateo. That small gesture, as insufficient as it was, considering everything that had happened, felt like something private, a silent acknowledgement. Perhaps the beginning of something resembling remorse. I don't know if I will ever fully forgive Sophia for what she tried to do. I don't know if I'll ever trust her again. But for the sake of my grandson, I'm willing to accept that small step toward reconciliation. Life is long, and holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and hoping someone else dies. I learned that lesson the hard way. Now at 76 years old, I value peace and joy far more than revenge or even perfect justice. When my grandson arrived after school that day, eager to learn how to make the cinnamon cookies that are a tradition in our family, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. As he chatted excitedly about his day at school while we mixed the ingredients, I realized that this was the true legacy I wanted to leave behind. Not just a house or material possessions, but memories, traditions, unconditional love. "Grandma," he asked as we waited for the cookies to bake, "did you always know how to make these cookies?" "No, my love. My grandmother taught me when I was about your age. And are you going to teach me all her recipes?" "Of course I will. And one day, maybe you'll teach them to your own children." His eyes sparkled at the thought. "And can they come here too? This house will always be open to family who respect and love each other," I replied, kissing his forehead. When Ricardo came home that afternoon and found the kitchen smelling of cinnamon and sugar, his face lit up. The three of us sat on the porch, eating warm cookies and watching the sun begin to set. This, I thought, is what it means to be home. Not just walls and a roof, not just a deed or accounts in our name, but the feeling of belonging, of safety, of being valued and respected. The ability to move freely, to express our thoughts, to be ourselves without fear or hesitation. Those 8 years of slow erosion of my dignity taught me to never again take that freedom for granted. To defend my space, my voice, my boundaries, not with anger or bitterness, but with clarity and resolve. And those 3 words Ricardo said that day, "This ends now," still resonate. Sometimes, all we need is someone to stand up for us when we don't have the strength to stand up for ourselves. Someone who sees what's happening when we become blind to our own suffering. Someone who says no more when we've become used to saying it's fine. Today, when I look around my house, my kitchen organized the way I like it, my flowers in the vases, I chose my books on the shelves where I placed them, I feel a mix of gratitude and determination. Gratitude for having taken back what I almost lost, and determination to never again let anyone make me feel small in my own space. My name is Juana. I'm 76 years old, and this is my house. My voice matters here. My presence is valued. My dignity is respected. And no one will convince me otherwise again. Now, if you liked this story, click on the next video appearing on the screen because in it, you'll hear a story of betrayal and uprising like you've never seen before.